Let's get to the Energy Secretary Rick Perry, as you know by now, going to leave his post by year end. The president confirming that news while talking to workers at a Louis Vuitton factory in Texas yesterday. The former Texas governor turned energy secretary has served in the post since the Trump presidency began.
Meanwhile, another big story from the White House, Energy Secretary Rick Perry resigning. He now joins me in his first television interview back home in Texas. You were at the rally last night, sir, and good morning, and thank you for your time today. I've got a lot to get through. Let's see how much we cover.
Good morning.
You bet. 2.5 years on the job. Your departure had been rumored for weeks rather. What does your departure have to do with Ukraine, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, well, it has absolutely nothing to do with Ukraine. It has everything to do with, for the last 8 or 9 months, I've been looking back to Texas on a pretty regular basis, to Round Top, Texas, my wife, my dogs, and kind of going on to the next adventure in life. And I had a number of things that I really wanted to get done before I departed and came back to Texas. Working on the LNG projects to where we're bringing American gas into Europe was a big part of that. Making sure that we had the MOUs done with Poland, with Ukraine, all of that process going on in the rest of the European Union so that they weren't being held hostage by that Russian gas. We also had back at home some issues with civil nuclear and being able to make nuclear cool again, if you will. And so we'd really been working on that. Tomorrow I leave for Brussels, hitting the small modular reactor conference, the first of its kind ever done. And the last, and frankly for me on a personal note, just one of the most important things I worked on was standing up an office from whole cloth on artificial intelligence, and that artificial intelligence technology office is now set up and ready to go.
Well, to you, from your military days, time as a governor and time in the White House, you got that okay? Hang on a second. We'll get this straightened out here in a moment. Here it is, live television. I'll say thank you for your service, sir. And if you've got me back here, I want to bring you back to Mick Mulvaney.
I'm back with you, Bill. We're back on with audio now.
Did his comments make things better or worse yesterday?
I think he was straight up with what he said. I think there are people trying to connect dots when the facts would, by basically saying that there was no quid pro quo in the sense of what those folks out there would like for it to be, that we're going to give you this money unless you go investigate Joe Biden and his son. I never heard that said anywhere, anytime, in any conversation, Bill. And I think the truth of the matter is we've been working to get Ukraine back in the sphere of influence of the United States and the Western states with American gas for 2+ years. When Poroshenko was over there, we met with him. We talked to him about, you got to get rid of the corruption in this country. Everyone knows that the oligarchs and the people in that country were corrupt, or too many of them were, let me put it that way. And Zelensky ran on this. He said, you elect me and I will stop this corruption in the country. We had those conversations with him.
Okay, let me try and nail down a few points here. So you're saying the Biden's name did not come up in any of your discussions with Ukrainian officials, correct? That's
never
what you said?
Heard. Never
did it come
heard
up
the
with
Biden's
your discussions
name
at
one
the White
time.
House?
No, not with anyone. I'm telling you, Bill, the Biden's name. Did corruption come up? We heard corruption in almost every conversation that we had talking about Ukraine and whether or not President Zelensky was going to come over here, because President Trump wasn't going to send American money to a country that had a history of being corrupt. And he was hammering that, and we hammered that. I pushed on him a lot to make that phone call because I became convinced that Zelensky, the people around him, were legitimately trying to get rid of the corruption and get off the Russian gas.
The president said you pushed him to make the phone call with Zelensky. Do you agree with that characterization?
Absolutely. I called multiple times and said, whether it was to John Bolton, to whether it was Mick Mulvaney, when I saw the president, I said, Mr. President, I think it's time to make this phone call. I think bringing in this president and showing him that we're going to be good, reliable, they have to do some things. They have to show us they're going to respect the rule of law, that they're going to be transparent, they're going to unbundle their midstream gas company. All of those things were part of him coming in. And I think that's completely and absolutely legitimate. That's what we're supposed to be doing, bringing the private sector in, American companies, American gas, and showing Europe that you can count on us and you're not going to be held hostage by Russian gas.
You said a week ago, Wall Street Journal, you were told to consult with Rudy Giuliani on matters with Ukraine. Were you okay with that?
You know, I was. I've known Rudy since 2008. I endorsed him for president in 2008.
It didn't strike you as odd or anything taken away
him
from the State Department when you were told to do that?
You know, here, you know, as the governor of Texas, I use people outside of government all the time to give me information, flow me in from experts. You know, I respect the State Department, but I happen to know people in the energy industry that are smarter than the State Department folks. I didn't see a problem with that at all.
Okay, you have a subpoena deadline as of today for documents as they relate to any involvement you had with Ukraine. Will you meet that deadline as of today?
Yeah, our general counsel is taking a look at that right now, and when they send their answer in at the end of the day, whatever their decision will be, I'll follow that.
I'm not sure if that was a yes or a no. Do you have one now?
Well, I don't know if that's a yes or a no yet because I haven't seen what the general counsel's advice to me is going to be.
Okay, Democrats are already asking you to testify. Will you do that?
Again, I'm going to rely upon our general counsel to give me advice. You got to remember, I've done this before when I was the governor of the state of Texas. I had an absolute and total trumped-up deal that worked out against me, and I'm going to do what the council tells me to do.
Okay, when you hear all this talk about immigration, whether it be coming across the border in Texas and the president's plea last night about the wall, when you hear the discussion on Capitol Hill about impeachment, what do you think people are missing in the story? Because your answers today have been emphatic, that there was nothing behind the scenes that was untoward. So when you see this being carried out by House Democrats, how are we to understand where this is going?
Well, I'm a big believer that we need to be doing trade and we need to be focused on it, and the USMCA, that needs to be passed. I mean, whether you're a Canadian citizen, a Mexican citizen, or a U.S. citizen. And that's being pushed to the side by this almost, crazed idea that somehow or another this president's done something wrong and we're going to impeach him. What he's done wrong in a lot of people's eyes is he won an election. And for them to get us so far off track in what I consider to be a total and absolute improper use. I mean, if they're going to do this, they need to at least follow the historic rules, and they're not. I mean, listen, I go back to, I got indicted as a sitting governor, and when it was all said and done, it was not only thrown out, my record was expunged. I had to spend a couple of $1 million defending it. But the point is, why are we letting our political process be so corrupted by the politics of trying to tear this country apart, when the fact is we got a lot of great things that we could be doing, and we are, but we're being hamstrung because of this, obvious, from my perspective, just politically generated issue.
Two last questions. Will they find any evidence of a crime based on your experience and your dealings with the West Wing of the White House and Ukraine, sir?
No.
How's your relationship with the president today?
It's awesome. He never ceases to amaze me. I mean, I'm sitting there yesterday on Air Force One watching multiple things happen. His chief of staff on television, and right as that ends, the president's dealing with a great story that, unfortunately, I think got pushed off to the side because of all this other stuff, and that is finding the way to do a ceasefire in a part of the world where multiple administrations haven't been able to address that. Very unconventional way of doing diplomacy. I get that, but I think we're making some great progress there, headed in the right direction. And then to go do a major event where in my home state of Texas, 1,000 jobs are going to get created at a Louis Vuitton manufacturer. You didn't ever think you'd hear Texas Louis Vuitton in the same
you're probably
sentence,
right
most
about
likely.
that. 30,000 outside.
And then he goes up.
Yeah, Democrats think Texas is in play. We'll see whether or not that's the case. I want to thank you for your time today and thank you for your service. And we'll see where that goes.
Bill.
Back on
You're
Capitol Hill. Secretary Perry,
sir.
Thank you for your time.
And he joins us this morning live from Texas. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
A few days ago, you said not today, not tomorrow, not next month, but you didn't say not next year. So I guess technically you were accurate. Why now?
Yes, sir. I've been looking at this for some time. I don't think anybody's surprised that, I've got a rather intense love affair with this state, my wife, this little town of Round Top where we've chosen to live. So the lure became overwhelming for me to come back home and to spend time with the people that I really love. And with that said, there were some things, big things, that I wanted to get done as the Secretary of Energy. Got a great team over there with Dan Brouette as the #2 and the folks that make up these national labs. For instance, getting LNG into the European theater, one of the most important projects I think that our country has. And I got tapped, being the Secretary of Energy, to lead that effort to make sure that European countries, Poland, for instance, Ukraine, which had lived under Soviet oppression before, and Soviet gas, or excuse me, Russian gas, was being used as a weapon against those countries. It had been cut off a number of times into Ukraine. So it made abundant good sense for us to be able to be in that market, to clearly be able to tell American companies, you can come here, you can work here. In Ukraine in particular, there was some powerful messages of you've got to have transparency, you've got to have rule of law, you've got to have the sanctity of contracts, you've got to end the corruption that we've seen there and we've heard about so many times. So those conversations were had over a long period of time with Ukraine, with Poroshenko, and then subsequently with the Zelensky administration. And we're successful in getting those done. The nuclear side of things, civil nuclear side of things, I'm leaving tomorrow for Brussels to go do a small modular reactor conference, the first of its kind, so America can come back and take the premier place as a developer of the technology and to win this nuclear industry back to America. The third thing, and this one's really important to me from a personal basis, I had great interaction with kids that had traumatic brain injury, concussions, post-traumatic stress, and standing up an office of artificial intelligence at the Department of Energy. I was able to get that finalized here within the last 45 days. So the timing was right for me. I've got these big things done. The agency's in great shape. It's going to continue to be focused on the areas that are important to America. So it was a right time for me to come back home.
You told Fox this morning it's not related to the House inquiry. You've also said you won't comply with the subpoena on advice of counsel. Are there any circumstances under which you would comply?
Well, I think you may be a little bit ahead of yourself there until our the advice of counsel comes out at today. I don't know what that answer is going to be actually. So let's just hold off on saying we are or we aren't going to address that issue until we get a final advice from our counsel.
Secretary Perry, Jim Cramer here. Good to see you. I've been following the nuclear industry for a long time, and I have a lot of utility execs on Mad Money. There isn't a soul that has said there will ever be a nuclear power plant built again in this country. We all know that it is a clean form of energy, but everyone says it is dead. What makes you think you can possibly revive it when the guys who would be building it they'd rather put up windmills? They would rather do solar, and nuclear's dead.
Yeah, look, I hate to correct you, but we're building a plant right now, Vogel, down in Georgia, and these small modular reactors
what are the
have some
overruns
real...
on Vogel? What are the overruns on Vogel? What is... Come on, I mean,
that's not what you said. I mean, I don't want to argue with you here, but let's get straight here.
They can't
I think
finish
the
Vogel.
idea that small modular reactors, settle down here, small modular reactors have the potential to be substantially more economically, safer, And so, you know, you sound like the conventional wisdom guys back 15 years ago that said peak oil. I hope you weren't one of those, were you?
Oh, come on, sir. I've been in favor of nuclear energy forever. I live next to a nuclear power plant in Sacramento.
With us.
I was like 5 feet away from it when I was living in my car, and it didn't affect me at all. That was Secretary Perry. Really, I am so in favor of nuclear energy, but these guys are so negative.
I need to take you to this small-minded reactor conference in Brussels. Come go with me and talk about it and be passionate about it. It is a potential for America. We can get there.
I hope so, because, boy, is it the cleanest form of energy. Yeah. You are dead right. I just wish these guys had more. I wish they believed in it more. And I think you're so right. It is the most sustainable form of energy.
Well, yeah, wind's pretty good. Your home state of Texas does pretty well with wind, too, doesn't it, Secretary Perry?
Well, it's one of the things. As a matter of fact, Texas, as a percentage, has more renewable energy than Europe as a whole. So, you know, we're headed in the right direction. The president wants an all-of-the-above energy policy. That's the reason, you know, he promotes all forms of energy and finding cleaner, more efficient ways to develop all of those. So, and he's a big proponent of us moving our nuclear side. He's not as big a fan of wind as I am.
What are you going to do when you step down? I would expect, you know, we cover, obviously, as you well know, and you and I have talked through the years. We're down at Kyle Bass's ranch a number of times through the years. I mean, you know corporate America fairly well. You see yourself serving on some boards. Is that kind of what you may choose to do?
You know, for the next, you know, until the end of the year, let me put it that way. I don't know exactly when I'm going to step away from my job, but we're going to be, you know, my wife and I will decide on what we want to do. You know, I was reading my devotional this morning that said, you know, what's the next big thing for you in your life? What's the most important thing you're going to be or going to do? And I hope in front of me is the biggest thing that I'll ever do. It may be something in the charitable side. It may be a prison ministry somewhere. It may be an opportunity to work with people to bring power to the billion-plus people in the world that don't have electricity. There's a, you know, I got a lot of opportunities. I'm a blessed man. I'm healthy. I got a fabulous wife to come home to. So my life's pretty good.
Mr. Secretary, we hope you'll come back often. It's good to see you. Congratulations on your run.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Rick Perry joining us from Texas today.
Outgoing Energy Secretary Rick Perry said he will not comply with the congressional subpoena, following in the footsteps of several other administration officials. The subpoena asked Perry to hand over records related to Ukraine as part of the impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. He was given until Friday. Cabinet officials, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Defense Secretary Mark Esper, and Vice President Mike Pence, have already done much the same thing. In a letter to House lawmakers, the Assistant Energy Secretary for Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs wrote, "Even if the inquiry was validly authorized, much of the information sought in the subpoena appears to consist of confidential executive branch communications that are potentially protected by executive privilege and would require careful review to ensure that no such information is improperly disclosed." Perry will resign at the end of the year. He made the announcement Thursday night in a video. President Trump has announced on Twitter that he'll nominate Deputy Energy Secretary Dan Brouillette to take Perry's place. The president said his experience in the sector is unparalleled. Brouillette is a former executive at USAA and Ford, as well as a former chief of staff to the House Energy Committee. He's also an Army veteran.
Later that day, Mulvaney released a statement to try and walk back those very damaging comments as if they never happened at all. Then hours later, Rick Perry, Donald Trump's energy secretary, and the third member of the vaunted Three Amigos put in charge of Trump's mess of a Ukraine policy, announced that he will be resigning. So let's see here. One of the Three Amigos overseeing U.S. policy on Ukraine is getting out of Dodge. And the two others, Trump donor turned ambassador Gordon Sondland and U.S. envoy Kurt Volker, have both given depositions to Congress for its impeachment inquiry. Oh, and Volker resigned, too, the day after the whistleblower account came out. So Trump's defense seems to be falling apart, to put it charitably. And his loyal subjects appear to be falling out of line. And this may just be the beginning, friends. Let's go on to Rick Perry, the other member of the Three Amigos, who is now resigning. This is his interview, of course, on Fox News, and here he is.
I think he was straight up with what he said. I think there are people trying to connect dots when the facts would. By basically saying that there was no quid pro quo in the sense of what those folks out there would like for it to be, that we're going to give you this money unless you go investigate Joe Biden and his son. I never heard that said anywhere, anytime, in any conversation.
Here's the problem with what he just said, that he's defending Mulvaney, even though Mulvaney described a quid pro quo to the point where the reporter said, that is a quid pro quo. Hello. You also then have allegations that Rick Perry had some things that he wanted as well, meaning some of his friends to be on the board of a different gas company, the state-owned gas company in Ukraine. So it appears that he was part of this scheme to replace the government in Ukraine, which is trying to be a democracy, with a more corruptible government that would do things that benefited Trump people. Could that be a legal problem for Rick Perry?
It very well could be. I mean, I think the first thing to say about that remarkable interview is I don't know what straight up counts for in Texas, but I think nobody with a straight face can describe this, what President Trump has been saying, as straight up and clear. I mean, it's been convoluted. He first said he didn't say it, then he admitted saying it, then he said it's okay. Now we're at the get over it phase. The explanations keep on shifting, but nothing has undermined the central core of what that whistleblower said to the Director of National Intelligence, Inspector General, a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
With respect to Perry himself, he might face some criminal liability, perhaps even also an impeachable offense. I think the facts will have to come out on that, and we just don't know them yet.
My dear DOE family, I've said many times that I have the coolest job in the world, and a big reason for that has been you. The men and women who serve alongside me at one of the most innovative places on earth, the Department of Energy. From my first day on the job in March of 2017, you welcomed me with open arms, even though you probably didn't know what to expect from this born and bred Texan who had just arrived in Washington, D.C. But since that time, you and I have worked diligently to advance our DOE mission. And the great thing is, we succeeded. And we continue to push the boundaries of what is possible each and every day. Some people wake up every day and they wonder if they're making a difference. The men and women who work at this department do not have to worry about that. You are literally changing the world. So it's with profound emotion and gratitude that I'm announcing my resignation, effective later this year as your Energy Secretary. There's much work to be done in these upcoming weeks, and I remain fully committed to accomplishing the goals that I set out to accomplish at the beginning of my tenure. And then I'll return to my favorite place in the world, Texas. But I'll treasure the memories of what we've accomplished together. During my time here at DOE, we pursued a true all-of-the-above strategy. We deployed all of our fuels, from renewables to fossil fuels to nuclear energy. We led the world in producing oil and gas and in reducing energy-related carbon emissions at the same time. We achieved the magnificent goal of energy independence. We became a net exporter of natural gas for the first time in more than 60 years, offering freedom to our friends and allies from energy coercion by some powerful adversaries out there. And we're ready to export our energy technology to deliver electricity to more than 1 billion human beings mired in energy poverty. We strengthened our national security by bolstering our nuclear security. We cleaned up numerous sites as we tackled America's post-Cold War environmental legacy. We stood up our Caesar office to deal with threats to the reliable delivery of electricity. We created an Office of Artificial Intelligence to coordinate the amazing work that we're doing in this game-changing arena. I've been blown away by the amazing work done at what I call the nation's crown jewels, our 17 national labs.
I've had the opportunity to visit all of them. In my travels abroad, people everywhere wanted to know about this department because our footprint and impact is global, and that is a testament to each and every one of you today. I thank President Trump for giving me the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm so glad that I said yes. And I thank all of you, my colleagues, my friends, my family, for making that opportunity a grand success. May God bless you as you continue to pursue DOE's great calling and mission, and may God continue to bless this great country of America.